I mean, looking at the front cover of your book, you make the point that on the 18th of September, the Scottish people will have, and I quote, absolute sovereign power. Can you explain, the importance of that statement and what you really mean by that?
Well, I used Franklin Roosevelt's model when Japan struck at Pearl Harbor. And Roosevelt was going to Congress immediately, the next day. The Secretary of State for War and the Secretary of State for Defense and State, all his advisors and his speechwriters wanted him to make a speech, a long speech and a diatribe against Japan. Roosevelt knew better. And you may have seen it time after time in some of the documentaries. His speech to Congress was a very short one, but people remember it. On this day in December 1942, the Empire of Japan, in a day that will last in infamy, attacked the United States of America unprovoked. Summed it all up in actually a few words. So I went searching for words. And the opening part of that book really hits the nail on the head. May seem immodest to say so, but I believe it does. What faces every person in Scotland on the 18th of September is that between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m, for 15 hours, for the first time ever, the people in Scotland are absolutely sovereign. Nobody can interfere with us. We go to the ballot. We are a sovereign people. What happens at 1 minute past 10 on the 18th September? Have we voted yes to keep that sovereignty at 1 minute past 10, or have we voted no to take it and hand it away forever to a nation south of the border, which means there's no harm, but has its own priorities, which are not our priorities? And that's the question that is posed to every single person in Scotland on that particular day. And I think if I hadn't written another word in that book, that sums up what we have before us then. It's a test of the Scottish population. And we should think a bit about history. I was involved in the election or the referendum in 1979 for what was a very weak assembly. Not enough people voted yes, enough people voted no. They promised through Alec Douglas-Hume in a historic television address, who told us this assembly isn't good enough for you. We need something better and we'll give you something better. We had enough no votes to stop the assembly. We didn't get anything better. We get Margaret Thatcher. And we get Thatcherism, which is man mind thyself, deals tack the hindmost, look after self-interest, the very antithesis of the values in Scottish society. And so folks should remember all the promises that might come about what they'll give us as a prize for voting no. You're going to get Boris Johnson instead of Margaret Thatcher.
And, bearing in mind that we have that power for that short period of time, if we vote no, do you think we'll ever get an opportunity for a referendum again?
No, I think it'll be another Flodden. On the battlefield of Flodden, we held the high ground. We held all the aces, ran down the hill and threw it away, got slaughtered. Right now, we hold all the aces because it's our decision on this 15 hours. Nobody can stop us going to the polling station and voting. If we vote no, imagine what it'll be like at 1 minute past 10. It's another Flodden. Holding all the cards, throwing them away, and I think you will see a great exodus of Scottish talent and ability from this country as the ambitious part of our society realises that the door has been closed and that there's nothing for them in the future. I'm a grandpa. I've got 10 grandchildren. And I have found it necessary to talk to each one of them individually and tell them, if we vote no, knowing as I do the real state of the United Kingdom economy and what will happen to us. If there's a no vote, I'm advising you to get the best qualifications you can, either academically or in terms of skill, and get out. Because this will remain a low-wage, high unemployment, unequal, unhappy society. And it'll be even worse than it is at the present time. What's going to happen to the young people who are knocking their pan out in this campaign, who have tremendous enthusiasm, a high morale and a great belief on what they can do in an independent Scotland? What are they going to do at 10 if they find it's a no vote? They'll start looking elsewhere. And once again, Scotland will contribute to the world economy as we always have done, with people migrating. And that's the future we've got. A lot of people, one of the defects, there are a lot of virtues in the Yes campaign, but one of the defects in the Yes campaign is that we aren't telling people what will happen if they vote no. What's the future inside the United Kingdom? This present recovery is a fraud. It's built on the sand of more national debt and more individual debt. The national debt of the UK is heading for £1.5 trillion. He's borrowing at the rate of £3,000 a minute at the present time. Individual debt, that's credit cards and mortgages, is now £1.4 trillion. So there comes a point where that becomes unsustainable. At the moment, they have postponed dealing with that unsustainability. If we vote no, and there's an election in 2015 for Westminster, whichever government's in, doesn't matter whether it's a Labour government, a Tory government, or a coalition government, there are £25 billion worth of cuts coming immediately. And there'll be £25 billion the year after, and £25 billion the year after. Our public services will be decimated. We have to go over to the Scottish people that we're attached to England, because basically we're talking about England. We should be honest about it. Charles Moore, who's a biographer of Margaret Thatcher in The Spectator last week, said, "What will we call the rest of the UK if Scotland goes?" And I've said, call them England. You've always called it England anyway. You know, that's basically the truth. It's a fact. And what then happens? Down in England, we're in the last part of the empire's decline. All empires decline. You know, the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Spanish and the Portuguese and the French, there comes a moment of decline. We're at the tail end of that decline. And I'll illustrate it. You remember the Queen's Jubilee, and Prince Philip was dressed in the Admiral of the Fleet uniform on a wee boat in the Thames. Now, every other Jubilee, including this present Queen's former Jubilees, the great big event was the review of the fleet, when the monarch sailed right down through the fleet and the sailors like me gave 3 cheers. There's no fleet to review. That's why they were in a wee boat on the Thames. And that's a signal of the decline that's taking place. When I was in the Navy in the 1950s, up to 1960, we had a home fleet, a Mediterranean fleet, a Far East fleet, and a West Indies station. We have none of them now. What you've got down at Rosyth being built is an aircraft carrier upon which they can't afford to be aircraft. That's all the signs of an empire in its final stages of decline. And we have to realise that. I'm sorry for the folk in the northeast of England, sorry for the folk in Merseyside, whom I've got a great affinity for. They are regions of a nation and they have no escape route. We're a nation and we can escape. And we should escape. And we've got a chance of escaping on the 18th. And if we escape, we will miss the cataclysm that has to come in the next 10 years in the economy south of the border, because they can't borrow forever. The day will come when they can't pay their debts, and that will be the day of reckoning, and we've got to be there on that day of reckoning.